Welcome back to the Athlete-Minded Stories podcast. So, we finally made it. Today is the opening ceremonies for the 2016 Olympic Games down in Rio, and I've been working hard to try to find as many Olympians as I could for this podcast. I got 10 Olympians who will be competing down in Rio in a number of different events, and nearly all of them agreed to a post-Olympics podcast as well, so you can hear their journey down in Rio and all their experiences. I know Rio is getting a lot of bad publicity right now, but hey, it's the Olympics. The best athletes in the world will be down there, so I'm sure it'll be amazing. For this series, the Olympic Games are only 2 weeks long, so I will be putting out an episode every day of the week until the 19th, since I have 10 Olympians. The athletes we will be talking to are Kristin, the captain of the USA women's volleyball team, Kristin, USA women's soccer player, JJ Javelet, USA women's rugby sevens player, Corey Jarvis, a Canadian men's wrestler, Laura Graves and Casey Perry Glass, 2 USA women's equestrian athletes, Michelle Carter, the USA women's shot put athlete, Nathan Schremsher, USA men's pentathlon athlete, Margot Isaacson, USA women's pentathlon athlete, Stephen Lambden, a USA men's taekwondo player, and finally, Victoria Folion, USA women's rugby sevens player. I was going to put the date and time for each of these athletes, but the date of their competition will vary. So I just say to be aware of them and look them up. You can actually use Google for that, since they've got a whole event schedule for the Rio Olympics if you just type in Rio Olympics schedule. So I hope you enjoy these. For the first one, we talked to USA women's soccer player Kristin, who was actually recently also featured in ESPN's Body Issue. It was really great hearing her story, and about how the women's national soccer team really haven't had much time to relax since winning the World Cup in 2015. She also has some great writings on her website, which I put in the show notes, and you can follow her on Twitter with @Kristin.
Now, without further ado, I welcome today's guest, Kristin. Kristin won a World Cup in 2015 with the women's national soccer team, set the record for goals at Stanford, and even appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine. Kristin, it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So, having you on, it's awesome. You've been a soccer star your entire life. You played in Sweden. You were part of the team that won the World Cup recently. So kind of start off, going into your story of what got you into soccer. I know you played a few sports growing up. So what kind of motivated you to, be good at soccer versus anything else?
Well, just growing up in Southern California with my sisters, we all played soccer. We were all really competitive. I'm from the middle of 3 girls. So I played on my sister's teams, and I think that soccer was so important to me because it was a family affair. And, we were driving out. My parents were the coaches and the team managers. The weekends, we would just road trip down and play games, and I think it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of work, but it really brought my family together.
Yeah, was there a big competitive rivalry between your sisters?
Just a natural, normal rivalry, I would say. Just, when you're kids, you're just competing against each other in games. And I was the middle, so like I said, I competed with both my sisters. And I think it was just like a healthy, normal, best friend. And also, they're always going to be the other team.
Yeah, and you just, like you said, healthily pushing each other. So in terms of you played tennis and track, was there any moment for you where you were like, wow, I want to do soccer? Because for me growing up, I was a multi-sport athlete. I played baseball and soccer and basketball, but I eventually realized that I wanted to take basketball seriously. So how come, in your opinion, you want to do soccer versus something else?
So I think what of the sports I played, which were tennis and track, as you said, I think what attracted me about soccer was it just was a team sport. So, it has the whole value of working together and being bigger than just yourself. And, the friendships, especially in youth soccer, are incredible. And I think that, like, when I look back at being a young athlete, that's what I think about. I think about, the time spent with my family and friends, working together, being competitive, of course, driven, yes, but I think just the whole concept of being more than yourself and working towards a larger goal is what really attracted me to soccer specifically.
Yeah, I love that. Even, I played basketball. It was a team sport, but it was still really lonely at times where I had to work on my game all the time. So, yeah, I can only imagine what it's like for a tennis athlete where it's really only you training for yourself because you're on your own team. So you broke all kinds of records at Stanford. So, take us into why you chose Stanford and, your experience there. I guess how you feel you did so well there. Was it any type of mentality you had, or did you feel you just worked harder than anybody else?
When I look back at Stanford and deciding to go there and my time there, it's so crazy to think about it because I was so young when I was choosing a college. Your sophomore, junior year of high school, you're already being asked to choose where you want to go. And at that point, I didn't even know, anything about myself. I was still just growing up. So I think I chose Stanford and really had no idea what to expect. And I'm just so lucky because it is one of the most amazing universities in the world. It's beautiful. It's, full of amazing people. The opportunities that are just on the campus, you can just feel it when you step on the grounds. And so I got really lucky in that way. And during my time, I think I went to a very, very competitive high school, a very small private high school. So I think that really prepared me to balance being a student athlete at Stanford, and it really gave me an advantage because I'm really good at time management, and that's from my education. I'm really good with, getting my work done efficiently to get the grades that I want to get, and then allow myself to really to do what I want to do on the field and spend extra time working on the details in soccer. So I think that was like a huge advantage for me coming through college, was just being able to manage my work and my play and my social life in a relatively good way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm curious, did you feel any shock once you got to that level? Because I remember my first time playing Division I basketball. I was one of the best high school basketball players in my state. I thought I was a man. I go to the next level. Everybody was their best player in high school. So I saw what I was up against, and I was like, wow, I'm not ready for this. So was it kind of a shock for you going to Stanford, and you're like, wow, all these other athletes, they're on my level?
Yeah, I think more than feeling like, oh, I'm not the best anymore. I think I was really shocked just leaving my home and leaving my comfort zone. You go into preseason in the middle of the heat of the summer. No one else is on campus but your team, and it's very overwhelming just getting to know everybody, leaving home for the first time, and then still being expected to compete at your absolute best and fight for a starting spot from the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
So that was definitely a struggle for me, and at the same time, you have all the rituals of being a D1 athlete and all the social obligations and expectations. I think that was really hard for me to manage in the beginning. And that's what I think, in the end, when I was able to manage it well, gave me a bigger advantage.
Yeah. And, freshman year, it's all probably scary. It's like, oh my gosh. So were there any moments where you thought, maybe this wasn't the best choice? Because obviously by your senior year, it was a great choice. And, soccer player of the year, Pac-10 conference player of the year, obviously, looking back, it was a great choice and everything, but I'm just curious if there were any times, in your first 2 years at all, hesitations wow, either I don't belong here or I should have made another choice or something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look back at my time and think it was easy or think, oh, what, an excellent time in my life. I think that I actually struggled a lot during my 4 years at Stanford, just emotionally going through a transition period, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, reorganizing my goals and my priorities. I definitely think it was a challenging time for me. And when I look back on it, there were moments where, I wanted to be home. I wanted to go back home to my family and friends, and I wasn't that far. A lot of people had gone to the East Coast and stuff, but for me it was still too far, and I often looked over my shoulder wondering, what everyone at home was doing.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that, because in my first month or so playing Division I basketball, you had practice in the morning, practice at night, you had study halls, you had classes. It got to the point where I was like, can I even do this? But I looked at my options, and my options were to quit or to keep going. So I'm just like, you know what, just keep going. So
yeah, I think everyone has that moment in their career for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's where, that's what separates two types of people, where they quit or they say, hey, I'm just going to take it easy, or they're just going to fight that much even harder. So, you won all these awards at Stanford, and then initially out of Stanford, you played with Magic Jack, right? So can you kind of go into that? Because I know after the first season, they went bankrupt. So, what was that like for you?
It was very interesting first experience as a professional. I wish that I knew then what I know now, just about the soccer world and the world at large. But it was very interesting coming into that professional environment. The WPS, which was the women's league at the time, was sort of larger than life in a way. I was coming from Stanford, where everything was very pristine, best doctors in the world, best care in the world, best facilities in the world. And it was sort of like no frills, like you're living in a dorm, you need to get your work done, and then you have all the resources in the world as an athlete. And when I went to Magic Jack, it was almost the opposite, where, we had these fabulous apartments, and we stayed in a really nice place in West Palm Beach. And, I wasn't really sure what kind of treatment I could get or what kind of care I could get. And I think that was really different, because I was used to having, before college, my family took care of me. During college, Stanford, the university just really does take care of you. And then I was out in the world, and I was in this particularly volatile environment, and I had no idea sort of how to sort that out myself. But it was definitely a growing experience and a learning experience for me. And I think I was still in a time where I was not on the national team. I was an outsider looking in, and that was really hard for me. And so I think that it was one of those times where my character really was revealed, because it was a challenging year of my life.
Yeah, 100%. And going into that, I read one of your writings where you mentioned that, that was still your goal, the national team. And then, after 1 year, the Magic Jack, they suspended operations, whatever that means. Maybe they didn't have enough money or whatever, but then you got to go to Sweden, which is where I played basketball after my career. So, so that's pretty cool. So what was that like for you going, halfway across the world? Like, my first experience over there, I was like, wow, I was happy to be playing pro basketball, but I was like, this is not America anymore. This is something completely different. So was there a culture shock there at all for you?
Well, I think the most interesting part of my story here is that it was February of 2012, and I had signed for the professional team in Atlanta. When I got an email that the entire league folded, and it was 5 days before all the European windows for transfer closed.
Right. I read that.
And a lot of the players who were on the national team, we were told they were just going to be full-time with the national team, and they're not going to even go find teams to play. So there was a small handful of us that were not on the national team and were dedicated to to continuing our careers, that had to transfer in a 5-day window. And that's how I ended up in Sweden. I didn't really have time to think about it. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, like I said about Stanford, and it was the biggest blessing of my life for sure. Just getting out of the American mentality, being with people who really put a high value on your daily happiness, and
Yes.
experiencing the moment, and I don't know, living really fully as opposed to always focusing on winning and success and money. It was so good for me. It was exactly what I needed in that moment in my life. I played on 2 different teams in Sweden, one in Gothenburg and one in Stockholm. And I just feel unusually lucky to have that experience and to have been changed by that experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. Where it's a whole different culture over there. Like, you grew up in, young women's soccer. You went to all the circuits, all the tournaments and everything. I'm not sure exactly how it was, if it was like extremely competitive, but I know from basketball, AAU, like, it's hard. Like, every day is a competition, and there's thousands of kids that want that Division I scholarship spot, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop basically until you quit the sport or you go to college and whatever. So, yeah, I mean, can you go into that real quick, like about how that, it was a whole different culture and it made you, I guess, were you kind of relieved that you were over there and not in that, high pressure environment anymore?
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I grew up with just like a lot of emphasis on winning, a lot of emphasis on, fighting to be your best always, perfectionism, and that's my personality as well. So just going over to Sweden where, people take a little bit longer to do things. When the sun comes out, everyone goes on a coffee break. People laugh a lot. And, I played on a team that was maybe like 4th place in the league. And they were happy with that, And I'd never played on a team that hadn't been the best team. And I had never even understood that you could possibly be happy unless you were in 1st place. So I think it was a huge shock to me, and I don't think I have adopted that in any way. I don't mean to say that now I don't care. It was just so interesting, and it gave me a lot of perspective to see that there was another way to be. And I think with that, how I live now is just understanding that if I focus on the current moment and instead of, the future when I could possibly win, it actually gets me closer to my goals. And I say that, I mean, instead of focusing on the outcome, I try to focus on the way. And I think that actually does bring me closer to the outcome. So, I think people, stereotype and say and fear a little bit that, if you don't care about the outcome, then you're like accepting mediocrity. But I truly believe that focusing on the way gets you out of mediocrity, and it just gets you there in a better way.
Yeah, I love it. I 100% love it because, a lot of times growing up or even now where, like you said, you shouldn't be happy or feel successful if you're not the best. Like everybody hears the saying, 2nd place is first loser. It's like, and I think that's the mentality that, especially in the United States, like that's what they experience. Like that's what the mentality is. Like you look at Steph Curry, who just came in 2nd place and lost by like 3 points. People calling him a loser. Like what could he have done now? So. Yeah, I definitely see how that, could have just refreshed your mentality there. So going into, after Gothenburg and then Stockholm, like I read one of your writings and it was really cool because you were mentioning like, wow, here I am in Sweden. Nobody's paying attention to me. Like I'm never going to be on the national team, but eventually it happened. So can you kind of go into that, that series of events that helped you be on the national team?
Well, actually, it was very quick. I think I moved to Gothenburg March 1st, 2012, and my first camp with the national team was April 2012. So I was there for less than a month before I got the call that I was invited to camp. I had just played in like 4 or 5 games in Gothenburg, and I think there was a bit of irony because when I was packing my bags, I thought I was sort of closing the door to my dreams of playing for the national team, and instead, I was opening them, and the head coach at the time was in Sweden. She saw me play a few of the games, and within the next month I was called in. And, I packed my bags very dramatically, telling my parents that I wouldn't be back in the United States for a year. And, I was back in a month. I wasn't home, but I was back in the U.S. inside the month. So it was the roundabout route, I think. I think a lot of players at the time thought, you need to be playing in the United States in front of the national team coaches to make it. But in the end, I did the opposite, and it got the exact result that I wanted.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, let's go into that. Let's go into that national team. And, if you want the World Cup, that's unbelievable. Every young athlete's dream. So was that like your dream growing up to win the World Cup? I mean, I'm sure you thought about it at points, but was that like a definitive thing that you said, this is exactly what I want to experience?
I do not remember ever saying never saying I dream to play on the national team. I want to be a pro soccer player. I want to win the World Cup. I never remember having any of those thoughts. But right before the World Cup, I was at my parents' house, and I was looking through some of my stuff in my old closet, and I came across some pictures of myself in 1999, which makes me 11, head to toe in USA gear at the World Cup that was in Pasadena. And I looked back at those pictures, and I was like, wow, I don't remember it, but I could see it all over my face that I was dreaming. And that's funny. It's funny how much of your childhood you forget, but there it was, written all over my face. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. It's like the subconscious, voice in your mind saying, like, I want to win the World Cup. I want to win the World Cup. So, I mean, can you go into that experience and what that was like? I mean, I'm sure you've probably talked about it millions of times, but, that experience of actually winning it, where you can come back to the United States and be champions and not first losers or anything.
I actually think that I got a lot of perspective from the World Cup. When you're fighting and you're dreaming about something for so long, it's always a surreal experience. And I feel similarly to, the build up to this Olympics. Every day I go to work and I do my job, and I'm fighting for this larger experience of fighting for the World Cup or fighting for an Olympics. But every day it's ordinary. It's my life. It's my job, and my task is small, and I just have to achieve the small tasks and make my way. So it's really hard. It's a hard thing to explain because it doesn't necessarily feel like you're playing in a World Cup. You just feel like you're doing the same thing that, at least for me, I felt like I was doing the same thing that I've been doing my entire life. And then when we came back from having won, that's when everything sort of changed. I think our day-to-day lives were changed. I think the reality of what had occurred became more of a reality to us. And I actually could experience how many people were watching, how many people cared, that the president was watching, that, there were thousands of little girls who were inspired. That only became a reality once we came back to the United States.
Yeah, where you don't really see it at all. And I love how you mentioned, like, yeah, you're technically on the stage, but you're still in the field. And when I was in Sweden, like for my first game, I was going through warm-ups, and I was just thinking, like, here I am across the entire world. Like, I have no family here, I have no friends. But guess what? They're doing the same layups I've been doing since I was like, 8 years old. So, guess what? It's still on the court. It's still, then once you get into it, it's just about playing. So, yeah, after that.
Yeah, I always say that soccer is the only thing that I've taken with me every single place for my entire life. It's the only thing. I had a teddy bear, but he doesn't make it on trips anymore, so now it's just me and soccer.
Nice. Do I sleep with the ball too? Because I used to sometimes sleep with my basketball growing up, but I got a little too old for that.
Yeah, I never did that. Although my dad probably tried to sneak a soccer ball into my bed at night.
Nice. So yeah, once you got back, like you mentioned, it was this like whirlwind tour of like, realizing how many young people you've inspired. Like not only women but men too. Like this is something that has really inspired a lot of people in the United States. So you went on this tour, you met, you went to the White House, you all received a key to the city from the New York City mayor. Like, what was that like? You were on the covers of Sports Illustrated, all these magazines. Like, was it a surreal experience, or going back to that subconscious, do you feel like you deserved it in a way?
I would say the actual World Cup was this real experience, and then when we got back, that's when it became like our actual lives and it became real. But I mean, it was a whirlwind still. I don't even know how I managed all that travel. It was a huge honor to be greeted like that from our country. I mean, I think it was so much fun. There's a moment at the Ticker Parade in New York City where I'll just never forget it. It was like time stood still, and just looking at all the faces, and I have like a pretty simple outlook on life, and it's just be happy and to try to make as many people happy. And when I was standing on that float looking at all the people, I just was really, really amazed by how much happiness, even if it was fleeting, drunken happiness for just a moment at a bar watching a soccer game. It's really incredible what sports can do and what fighting for your dreams can do.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like all the effort and sweat and early mornings paid off, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So, yeah, I mean, with, in the coming future, what is getting you excited for like women's soccer now? Is it just like the publicity that your team is getting, or the games? Or I'm just curious, what's really motivating you now that you have basically won the pinnacle of soccer, which is the World Cup?
Well, we had almost no time to breathe.
Yeah.
We had a 10-game victory tour, and, we had a ton of obligations after winning in terms of where we were supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. And as soon as December rolled around, not even 6 months after the tournament, we were in full-blown Olympic mode, and we've been there ever since. So I don't feel like I miss a beat in terms of soccer. There was no enjoying that win and relaxing. We're straight into the next, and our team's pretty serious about being at our absolute best this summer at the Olympics and, bringing home gold medal. So this will be my first Olympics that I've ever played in, and it's a huge deal to me. And I think that it was awesome that it came so close, because it didn't give us a second of time to waste.
Nice, yeah, and you had to stay in focus mode, right? Like, you couldn't do another whirlwind, come home and see everybody, like, focus mode. So I'm curious of that training, like, what kind of training, like, were you doing, like, 6 months ago? Because, like, I know as an athlete, you can't really train, like, 100% year-round, because you can easily get burnt out. So did they kind of ease you into Olympic training, and then now, like, pushing it hard? I'm just curious what that's like.
I think it was tough because after the World Cup is when we would have had a break if it was, just an international schedule. But we went back to our club teams and we were pushing for the playoffs. And we got a little bit of a break in November. And then we hit it pretty hard December, January. I think that's the time that, in the physiology of it is that's when you build muscle, build your speed, build your fitness, your core. And we really haven't tapered off, if I'm honest. We've been going pretty hard since the beginning of the year, with small breaks here and there just to recharge and go again. And I think it will be physically demanding on us. And I think once August is done, a lot of people will need a big break.
Yeah, big time. It's like, even like NBA guys where now their season ends and now they have to start training for the Olympics again. So, I mean, do you feel like you're kind of like exhausted at all, or, is this motivating you through where, even if you are exhausted, you're still going to push through it?
I think I'm exhausted at times and I'm exhilarated at times. And it's just the balance between those two things, making sure I'm not doing too much, but I'm doing enough.
Perfect. So yeah, Kristin, really, really appreciate you, being on this podcast. We're finishing up. So, I mean, do you have any advice for young women athletes or young male soccer players at all? That's one of the things I always ask. Do you have advice for young athletes or coaches or parents at all? I mean, people look at you, and they like you're where a lot of them want to be. So I'm just curious if you have any advice there.
I guess I would just say that the value I find in sport is just in the pursuit of being your personal best. And you can find that at every level. So, if you're 8 years old and you're kicking a soccer ball for the first time, the challenge begins now to step on the field and do your best self every time. And if you do that every day of your life, you'll never fail, no matter if you come home with every record and gold medal in the world or if you come home with none. I think the true value isn't the medal, it isn't the accolades, it's this intangible gift that the sport gives back to you when you treat it with integrity. So that's my advice to, everyone out there, young, old, athlete or not. It's just really, I would like to encourage people to just let go of all the distractions and really narrow in on, their passion and, what they love to do and doing it to the best of their ability.
No, I love it. And that's one of the things, like I've talked to, different Olympians or other high-level athletes about. And one of the biggest things they say is that they fall in love with the training. Like, you didn't start off playing soccer to make, tons of money, or maybe you did, but for a lot of athletes, it's not about the money. It's not about fame. It's not about whatever. It's like they fall in love with the training and they just love to do it. And, that's what it was for me.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, where, a 2-hour workout, sprints, for 2 hours, that's, I'm not going to say fun, but you're okay with that, right? Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's about the outcomes that you want to win and everything, but you have to enjoy the training and the journey and, pushing yourself to these new heights. So, Kristin, really, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Some of your writings are unbelievable. So I'll definitely put them in the show notes. Any parting thoughts at all?
No, that's all. Thanks for having me.
All right, perfect, Kristin. Thanks.
You just heard women's national soccer team player for the USA, Kristin Press. Next episode, we talk to USA men's Taekwondo athlete, Stephen Lambden. I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of the Olympic series, because we're just getting started. See you next time. JDH